and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, when prices of commodities go up, it seems like the price of everything starts to go up, including your input costs. We'll talk about keeping 2013's input costs in line.
Well, this year was a very unusual year, Darren, one of the hottest on record. And because of that, harvest has been exceptionally early all around the country. Even on our own farm, we're probably going to start corn harvest a full month earlier than we normally would. Well, after an early harvest, what should you do with all that time? We're going to talk about that today.
We've got many things to talk about, including a Weed of the Week that may just pop up if you have some extra time in the fall. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
In our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about how farmers know when to harvest their crops. We had a great example of that right here, Brian, in this particular wheat field. We had wheat that the stems were green, and so it looked like, oh, that plant is still growing, but the grain was all dry. How do you know when it's time to go?
Okay, so the whole thing is, if you're a non-farmer, and the reason why we're bringing this up is because we've gotten this question from non-farmers, and they say, well, how do you really know if you should be out there then, or a week earlier, a week later? It varies so dramatically based on the crop. So we'll just give you a few examples today. All right, with wheat specifically, what we're looking at is the grain, and that grain needs to be fit. And with many different grains like wheat, corn, and so on, we're looking at the moisture percentage that's actually in that grain. So for example, in wheat and corn, we'd like to have that moisture percentage low. If the moisture percentage is not low, then we can't store that grain in a bin. With the wheat, we'd like to have that wheat moisture at, let's say, 13% moisture. Now, we've harvested wheat at 17 or 18% moisture, but the problem is then, as a farmer, you have to spend money to dry that grain down because grain elevators will only accept grains with so much moisture in them.
Well, if they do take grain that's a little bit wetter, what they do is charge the farmer for that. Well, hey, we're taking some risk here because we've got too much moisture in that grain. We've got to dry it down. And the other thing about that is, besides the drying expense, is you're going to have some shrink loss. Think about it this way. If a farmer is selling grain that's 20% moisture and the elevator wants it at 13 to 15% moisture, depending on the grain, well, that elevator is going to have some loss because the farmer is actually selling them a whole bunch of water in the truck. Now, granted, they aren't adding water to the truck. That would be illegal. But there is water inside that kernel that the grain elevator really doesn't want to pay for.
Okay, now Darren, you brought up a good point. So with corn, grain elevators will take that corn with no dock at 15% moisture, and some of them even 15.5% moisture. Well, last fall, corn got really dry in a lot of the country just because of the way the year went and extra heat units and everything. Same kind of thing is happening this year. So some farmers are out harvesting corn at 12% moisture. And you say, well, if you could actually have a little more water in that grain and get it up to 15% moisture, you could in effect sell some water for a good price. So why can't you put water on there, Darren?
Well, that's just going to create problems. You know, there's one thing if the water is actually integrated inside that kernel. It's another thing when you spray water on top of a kernel, you're going to have a lot more spoilage. And you just can't control how that grain's going to act.
And the whole point is, what Darren said earlier is it's illegal. You can't actually do that. So,
well, okay, let's look at it this way. When we talk about soybeans, for example, soybeans can dry up really quickly out in the field. They can go from being 13 or 14% moisture in the beans on a real hot, sunny day. They can drop a couple points very easily, and all of a sudden you've got soybeans at 11%. Now, when an elevator will actually buy them at 13%, a farmer wants to be as close to that 13% as possible. They don't want to lose that moisture that they could get paid for in the grain. And in fact, in some processing plants, they'd prefer to have a little bit more moisture in the grain. So farmers are trying to do it at the right moisture percentage. Now, if you've got beans that are starting to dry out, hey, we had a hot sunny day yesterday, now they're down to 10% moisture. Well, guess what? We had a heavy dew this morning. The plants are all wet, and some of those kernels will actually soak some moisture back in. So farmers, if beans are way too dry, they'll try to harvest in the morning if they can. Now, it's tough to cut the stalks and everything in the morning, but they'll try to get going as soon as they can when those kernels may have just a little bit more moisture than they will in the afternoon.
Okay, so that's a little about harvesting grain. And for Darren and me, we farm corn, soybeans, and wheat. We don't have any livestock on the farm anymore, so we're just after the harvest of grain. Now, there are some corn farmers who want silage, and then it's whole different. They're not looking at the moisture in the grain, they're looking at the the moisture overall in the plant. And they're going to be cutting that corn for silage 2 to 4 weeks earlier, at least, than what we would be harvesting that corn for grain, because they want more moisture in it, and that silage is actually going to ferment in a silo or some other storage spot that they have.
Well, one other thing that farmers may harvest is alfalfa hay. Now, if farmers are going to cut hay, it's going to be green and full of blooms perhaps and actively growing. But farmers will cut it, they'll leave it lay on the ground out in the sun for a few days so that hay can dry out a little bit, and then it'll be safe to bale it up so they won't have a big wet bale in the barn.
Yeah, but let's talk about that. As soon as you see the first flower out in that alfalfa field, you want to take that off, because at that point, you're maximizing total digestible nutrients. If you let that alfalfa field get lots of flowers on it, you've now lowered total digestible nutrients. You may have more total alfalfa that you've cut, but you don't have as many total digestible nutrients.
And it varies a little bit depending on what farmers are doing. Now, let's get back to the corn, soybeans, and wheat. You may be deceived driving by some fields that are all green. And you say, wow, there's still a lot of green leaves out there. Well, that field can't be ready. Or you may look at another field and say, well, it's totally brown. I guess it's time to go now, and you may be way too late. So we do really want to look at the grain in grain fields. If you're harvesting corn, soybeans, wheat, and other crops, for the grain, we want to look at what the grain is for moisture percent, not necessarily the plant.
Well, as you can see, there are a lot of different things that go into deciding exactly when to harvest, and one of those things, unfortunately, can be if farmers have a lot of our weed of the week. We'll tell you how to stop this weed on your farm coming up later in the show.
Harvest season will soon be over, but don't put away your equipment until you bring it into Titan Machinery, your Case IH dealer. Take advantage of our Uptime Maintenance program. Uptime is Titan's preventative maintenance service designed to eliminate costly downtime during the short working season. Our technicians average more than 10 years of experience and use a comprehensive checklist to find problems before they slow you down. Call Titan Machinery today to schedule your Uptime service so you can spend the winter worry-free. Titan Machinery and Case IH. Better solutions.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
Not a weed.
Hi!
It's our agriculture liquid sales professional. Brian's never really liked salesmen.
But I like him.
I heard you talking about testing products to make sure they work. You know, Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers does more research to prove our products than any other fertilizer company.
Yeah, I've seen your reports. There's a ton of proof.
We've been to the North Central Research Station. We've seen AgriLiquid's 500-acre proving ground up close and personal.
We know that when we use agriculture liquid fertilizers, it's like having all that research on our farm.
It's like having Dr. Jerry and the team right here in your field.
Dr. Who?
Find out how Dr. Jerry and his team can help you increase yields at www.farmguytv.com.
Hey, we have field days at the North Central Research Station in late summer. You're all invited.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve Azar, singer, songwriter, and recording artist. My good friend Brad Swenson, owner of Swenson Investments and Commodities, has a great team that helps farmers and ranchers with farm estate plans.
Our goal is to help you avoid or minimize federal estate tax. We work with you, your attorney, banker, and advisors.
Preserve your wealth and pass the family farm down to the next generation. Call my good friends at Swenson Investments and Commodities.
This year's harvest around the country is occurring earlier than almost ever before, Darren. So the question I've gotten lately is, okay, if I'm gonna get done with harvest 2 to 4 weeks earlier than normal, is there anything in particular I should do with that extra time that would make me more money on my farm?
Well, this is what I like, extra time. You know, they always say, oh, you can't create more time. Yes, you can. If you have a lot of heat during the summer, you get an early harvest. Farmers have more time to get things done in the northern part of our country before the snow hits. And that's really something that on our farm, we're always trying to get harvest done before there's snow so we don't have big issues. Well, now we've got quite a bit of time to do things. One of the first things that we're gonna do is we're gonna be tiling some areas. Now, I know that some people will hear this and say, wait a minute, We had a terrible drought. Why are you worried about getting rid of moisture? We need more moisture.
Well, yes, but the whole thing is we're going to farm for many, many, many years, and our family, a lot of times on the farm, is going to farm for generations. Well, we want to get that ground in great shape, and by tiling, you do so many good things for your farm. It's not just about moisture removal. It's about getting your soil fixed. It's about reducing compaction. It's about improving bad soil pH areas. I mean, even for that matter, it's about getting stuck less, because it's one of those, well, seriously, I mean, it's one of those things. You end up destroying equipment, people get hurt. It's just a bad deal overall, and we want to get those things fixed. And this is the year to get things done, because now you can get into a lot of those areas that were somewhat questionable in the past, a little too wet. You can go right through everything right now.
Well, you know, it's kind of amazing this year. With all the drought that we had across the country and in our state as well, there were parts of the state where the crop still made it. You know, they caught a couple of rains here and there, and they still got a halfway decent crop. But parts of those fields, Brian, in the lower parts where it was heavier ground, it should have been some of the best crop in a dry year. Well, they actually flooded out or drowned out early in the spring.
Right, so that crop didn't die because of drought. It died because there was too much moisture early in the year, and then that just set the farmer up for a bad crop all the way through. On our own farm even, you could see right where some of the tile lines were. That's where our best crop is this fall. So even though it was a dry year, we were still too wet for a short period of time this spring. And the point is, you've got to give your plants the best opportunity possible to get very deep roots early in the year. If they can't develop those deep roots early in the year, a dry summer comes along and you're done. I mean, there's nothing much you can do. Okay, so tiling, very important. Another thing a lot of farmers are considering, because harvest has come off so early, is putting in a little winter wheat this fall. But Darren, the wheat price isn't that good. Everybody's saying, I want corn and beans. So what's going to happen with winter wheat acres this fall?
Well, that's a good question, Brian. It's pretty tough to compete against those high prices on corn and soybeans. But let's say that you're going to put some wheat in. You're concerned about having a good rotation. Maybe you've got some Roundup resistant weeds in your area and you say, you know what, I can wipe them out in wheat. I'm going to put some wheat on some acres out there. That's fine. But now we've got a little bit early harvest here, and like you see in this particular field that was wheat, there's some volunteers popping up. If you're going to put wheat back into a situation, whether it's coming off wheat or another crop, you want to make sure that you stop that green bridge. You don't want to have any green plants growing out there for at least 2 weeks before you seed. That way you don't have a big issue with any kind of bugs that may carry over from one crop to the next, or if you're coming off a grass crop going to wheat, which is a grass crop, of course, you don't want to have any of those diseases that can affect grass plants moving from one crop to the next. Otherwise, as your winter wheat comes up in the fall, it's already got disease, it's already got bugs, and you're set up for a disaster.
All right, with this early harvest, one of the most important things we want you to do is soil test. And the main reason why is because this year there's so much variability out there. Even on our own farm, we're going to have areas of 0, we're going to have areas of 220 bushel corn. Here's the problem. Those areas are in the same field. So
and often not that far away from each
right.
other.
So we've got areas that need nothing. We've got areas that need probably quite a bit. And how are you going to handle all that? You've got to do some soil testing to find out what you've got to begin with. And then if you've got some extra time, get yourself set up. You can do your own variable rate fertilizer. You can do your own grid soil sampling, these kind of things. And I know it may seem a little bit challenging. You say, oh, I don't know if I can handle that. There is better software that keeps coming out every single year. You can absolutely do these types of jobs yourself on your farm. It'll make you a lot of money. And then of course, tillage. I mean, it's something that every farmer does, is at least some tillage. Probably the number one thing we want to focus on in the fall is compaction reduction.
Well, there's a couple things with tillage, Brian. One, a lot of that ground is pretty hard this year from the drought. Yep. And you know, you may have some issues with that you have to break things up, especially if you're going to do a fall seeded crop. You want to have a nice seed bed. The other thing would be, if you had some rain later on in the summer or early in the fall, you may have created some compaction issues as you were out there harvesting with a grain cart, with a combine, or trucks, or whatever was out in your fields. We want to deal with those compacted areas because it sure showed up this year. Where we had compaction out in fields, wow, the crop really suffered when we went through this tough dry year. Now the other thing that we'll want to think about is residue management. We may have a lot of residue out there depending on what kind of crop you had. I try to do as little tillage as possible. Personally, I like strip till, but for you, it may be you want to do conventional tillage and you're just going to leave, you know, a certain percentage, maybe it's 30% of the residue on top of the ground to protect the soil. Either way, you have to think about residue management and compaction when it comes to fall tillage.
Well, with that compaction on the tillage side though, the big thing that we want you to focus on is where is your compaction in the soil? Dig around a little bit, find out where it is, and get below the bottom hard pan. A lot of times that's going to be 16, 16, 18, maybe even 20 inches deep. On our own farm, for example, we got a couple new fields this year. We're going to be doing some what we call zone building down deep. We're going to run a straight shank narrow point down about 20 inches deep or so in the soil. We want to do that so we cut some slices down through all compaction layers. It really helps get our roots a lot deeper, and it helps out dramatically in a year like this when we get drought.
Well, there's certainly a lot of things to do when you have an early harvest, and you can get a lot of work done that can improve your farm for many years to come. So don't squander your extra time this fall. Get some work done on your farm. You can set yourself up for a long time.
Well, one of the important things too that you need to do this fall is controlling our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
For lower costs and higher production, see your Mandako dealer. Ask about the best production-built land roller on the market. Mandako, simple design for easy transport and easy use. 12 to 62 foot widths, heavy-duty 4x8 by 3/8 inch tube frame, and now available with a steerable wing wheel. Mandako land rollers. Improved soil to seed contact, faster, more uniform germination, less moisture loss. Eliminate downtime due to rocks. See your Mandako dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call 877-915-8790.
If you want to take your farm to the next level, you have to go where the in-field research is being done. Hi, I'm Darren Hefty with Ag PhD TV. One of the field tours that Brian and I have enjoyed the most each summer is the North Central Research Station tour in Michigan. There are over 500 acres of replicated trials in corn, soybeans, wheat, and numerous other crops. You'll learn more about crop fertility in a few hours than most farmers will in a decade. Visit agroliquid.com for all the details, and maybe we'll see you there.
Back in 1966, Advanced Drainage Systems, Inc. was the first company to start manufacturing plastic agricultural drainage pipe in the United States. And today, ADS continues our leadership with superior pipe production and service capabilities. Our roots are firmly entrenched in the agriculture industry, and we're committed to helping farmers grow their business. With 54 manufacturing plants and 24 distribution yards throughout the world, you can count on ADS and our green striped pipe to be there when you need us. Advanced Drainage Systems, the green striped pipe you can count on.
Over the generations, fertilizer, the unsung hero of the farm, has been in the background, quietly nourishing crops with very little fanfare. Until now. Meet the next generation of fertilizer. Micro Essentials.
Case IH set the standard for improving power and fuel economy with SCR technology, while others were still trying to decide what the standard was. Only efficient power from Case IH is proven in the field 10,000 times over. And you'll find it in all our high horsepower equipment, from tractors to combines to sprayers. The world of farming is changing. Will you be ready?
I'm ready.
To learn more about how you can be ready with a proven leader, visit caseih.com/efficientpower.
Well, Brian, the thing I'm concerned about for 2013 is my input costs are going way up for my farm.
Good grief. Here's the whole thing, and we talk about this a lot on the show. You can't focus on costs. What you have to focus on is return on investment. Now, don't get me wrong, in some cases that means cutting your costs. But in a lot of cases, it just means I want to invest as much money as I can as long as anything I'm investing gives me a good return. But the whole thing is, even if I'm going to invest a whole bunch of money on my farm, I want to get the best deal of the year. So I'm going to use seed one way or the other. How do I get the best deal? I'm going to use fungicide one way or the other. How do I get the best deal? Fertilizer, all these things. So that's what we wanted to focus on today.
Okay, well, here's the challenge. Seed corn has gone up in price. So it goes up 5 or even 10% depending on what you're getting exactly from last year. So how is that a good thing for me?
Okay, so here's the thing with the seed corn. In my opinion, I think we're going to have intentions of 100 million corn acres going into 2013, which means that seed supply is going to be very tight again. When seed supply is tight, then unfortunately, we're not going to have a lot of discounting. Here's my suggestion on this. You buy early. You can prepay for your seed right now from a lot of different seed companies. Prepay, you order early, take advantage of all those order and prepaid discounts. That's how you can get your best deal.
Well, one other thing I'm concerned about, Brian, is herbicides. When we look at some of the different herbicides out there, they were in tight supply this year, and and we're seeing more acres with tough to control or even Roundup resistant weeds. So guys are using more of these broadleaf partners for sure, and they're using higher rates of glyphosate all the time.
Yeah,
so
I'm going to give you a very specific example. So one of the major suppliers of glyphosate is on allocation for the next 8 months. 8 months to all the retailers that are bringing their product in. So if you want glyphosate, I'd suggest getting it right now. I'll just tell you something that goes on in the ag chem industry. You may or may not have known this already, but a lot of the big companies have load programs with all their dealers. And so the first loads that they bring in for the year, and this happens in the summer and early fall, those are at a better price than the loads they bring in later. And very few retailers can bring in enough for the entire next year. So that's the reason why prices always start increasing about January, February, especially by May and June. You're going to pay 10 to 20% higher for ag chem. That's just the way it is. So if you want to get the best deal of the year, get it now. There are fill and load programs even for farmers right now, where if you take it, you probably save in that range of 10 to 20%. Why not do it? Okay, for fertilizer, this is the one area where I don't know if taking it early is going to pay this year, Darren, because there's going to be a lot less demand. I mean, dramatically less demand for P&K, in my opinion, because of the drought that we had this year. We very well might have cheaper P&K prices come spring. I doubt that'll happen with nitrogen, but I'm just saying, with all these other things, seed, chem, probably nitrogen, buy now, pay now, take it now, you're way better off. With P&K, I just don't know. If you have our weed of the week, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a good return on investment no matter what. It's one of the worst weeds we face, and it's glyphosate resistant in many areas. We'll talk about it coming up next.
Hefty Seed Company is proud to sponsor today's Weed of the Week. At Hefty's, you'll always get a great price and solid agronomy information.
We're Hefty's, and we're big on the farm.
Our weed of the week is Marestail. Marestail is a winter annual weed that likes to get a start in the fall, and Roundup doesn't kill it.
Well, Roundup does kill some of the plants. It's just not very many anymore, unfortunately. So you're probably going to have to use something other than Roundup. But the thing is, if you're going out and you're using Roundup anyway, to kill all these other weeds, what are you going to throw in with Roundup to stop Marestail?
All right, well, if you're out in corn and you're doing a burn down ahead of planting next spring.
Well, let's talk about right now. I mean, right now, what could you do? Because you just said it's going to probably come up in the fall.
You can do
How do you stop it?
You can do the same things. You can use 2,4-D or you can use dicamba. Now, if you're in the fall, you can certainly use higher rates of 2,4-D. If you're in the spring, then dicamba is going to be your best option. You can burn it down before that crop is planted, and you've got no problems once you get in.
Okay, talking about the dicamba, we've had some Marestail on our farm. Not a tremendous amount. We've usually stopped it, but it shows up more in no-till and strip-till. Conventional tillage, especially in the fall, a lot of times we'll wipe it out, and then you don't have the problem in the spring. But anyway, we've gone out with a full quart of Banville. And I know you might say, whoa, I've never used that higher rate. Well, you know what? You want to kill some of these tough weeds, you're going to have to do some things you don't normally do. And it doesn't cost that much money. What are we talking? 10 bucks an acre? I mean, 12 bucks an acre? It's just not that much money. Just go hammer that stuff in the fall, and then you generally don't have a problem in the spring.
That's a good thing, though, to say, Brian, is in the fall, you can do things you can't get away with in the spring. You can't use some high rates of certain products because you're worried about plant back restrictions. If you're doing it now in the fall, you've got a long time before you're going to plant.
All right, so here's the real challenge. If I'm going to plant a broadleaf crop like soybeans, I can't use 2,4-D, I can't use dicamba in the spring now. What should I use? Let's say that I'm ready to go plant my soybeans and I got Marestail out there. What am I going to spray?
Well, if you're going to do tillage, do it real early. Otherwise, the plants get big and it seems like you just kind of kink them over and you don't really rip them up completely. So if you're going to be using herbicide, I really like Authority MTZ. You can put that right with the Roundup burn down. Even if the Roundup's not effective, you've got Authority and you've got the MTZ portion of that, which is Sencor. That does a nice job.
I like straight sharpen in corn and wheat when I can use higher rates. When I can only use 1 ounce of sharpen, I'm going to have to throw something else with it. I can't use another PPO like Authority with it or Valor, but what I can do is throw some Sencor. So Sencor plus sharpen, that's a pretty good one too.
All right, in crop, first rate is probably your best option if you can get it when it's real small, but you won't because it started in the fall, and by the time your beans are up and you're spraying post-emerge, those Marestail are huge. So be realistic about it. Use some first rate, probably mix some Flex Star with it to try and get some extra kick, but good luck if it gets big in your beans.
Yep, in corn and wheat, not that much problem. We've got several products that will kill it. Again, we come back to the dicamba. Something like Status in corn is fantastic.
Well, that's all for our Weed of the Week, Marestail, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The world of farming is changing. From the power and versatility of Steiger and Magnum tractors to the legendary reliability of axial flow combines, Case IH can help you be ready. To learn more, visit caseih.com/be ready.
There's several new pieces of equipment that got lots of attention at our field day this summer. We'll show you one in today's Iron Talk. One of the things we got the most questions on after our field day this summer is, why did you switch to a corn head that folds up? And yeah, we did switch this year and we're getting a different corn head. We're actually getting a Capello head. The reason that we did that is because of how much time we're gonna save. Well, partly because we wanted a chopping corn head as well, but when you think about that folding head, rather than taking the head off, hauling that separately down the road, we felt like we were saving about 30 minutes at least every time we move from field to field. We farm about 20 fields on our farm, and you figure 20 fields times 30 minutes each move, that's 600 minutes at least. That's if everything goes just perfectly smooth that we're gonna save in the fall. Well, 600 minutes, that's 10 hours. That's a 10-hour workday. And when you look at harvest time, every one of those days is critical. We just added a whole nother day, or basically took away a wasted day, and now we've got that much extra time during harvest because we can just fold our corn head up and drive down the road. Even this 12-row, 30-inch head, we can fold that up where it fits inside the duals on the combine. So it's not going to be any wider than just driving the combine down the road by itself. It's a huge advantage for us. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Speed, strength, and efficiency make Capello corn heads a head above the rest. Built with polymer components that exceed industry standards, Capello corn heads continue to push the boundaries for maximizing grain retention while using less energy. Visit CapelloUSA.com and learn more about Capello's state-of-the-art chopping technology that cuts cleaner, allowing your horsepower to remain where it belongs, with your combine, so you can harvest faster in all weather conditions. Add to that an amazing folding feature, and it's clear to see why Capello is a head above the rest.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
Everything is better to the power of Nutrisphere N. Proven to shield against leaching, volatilization, and denitrification, Nutrisphere N Nitrogen Fertilizer Manager helps you maximize the efficiency of your nitrogen applications. In fact, research shows that in 184 corn trials, Nutrisphere N increases yields by an average of 13.2 bushels per acre. Do the math for yourself. Contact your local fertilizer dealer today and take your operation to the power of Nutrisphere N.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
Introducing the all-new Backsaver Swing Popper Auger Mover. Backsavers have interchangeable parts which allows you easy access to move or swing your augers to fit your harvesting needs. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to join us again next time for another Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, Farm Basics, and a whole lot more. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Organic matter improves soil structure and tilth. It improves microbial activity and soil life. Organic matter allows soils to hold more water and nutrients for your crop. To learn more about building it, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.